This is the Sonder Community Podcast. Our goal is simple: better ourselves and better the world. My friends, okay, this is Corey Moore on the Sonder Community Podcast. I'm currently in my closet while my baby is sleeping right outside this door, so you may feel like which is honestly what is always the case whenever I'm recording. So it may sound often like I'm trying to whisper in your ear, but I'm just trying to be quiet so I don't wake him up. I figured that some people who are listening to this hopefully do not know me. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But just to give a quick overview of who I am, I spent I went to a private Christian elementary, middle, and high school. I went to the church that was attached and ran that school all my life. Pretty much all my life from the time that I was going to that school, at least. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I want to work at a church. And I had no luck for a long time. I kept getting denied internships, and I eventually got an internship, started, helped do some ministries like youth ministry, and helped start a young adult ministry. And it doesn't, all these details don't super matter. I eventually did get hired on at the church that I was working at. And during this, the last couple of years, it was basically my whole world. From the time I was like 13, I decided, okay, I do want to work for a church. Every week I had my 4 or 5 churches that I was watching sermons from, trying to get, in my mind, I was trying to get a wide perspective and trying to learn from what I was viewing as like really great leaders and speakers and communicators. And, they probably still are great speakers and communicators. I'd still say that. But I spent a lot of time doing that on top of the Bible classes and all those things, my 3-year-old has started, like, whenever he kind of just runs out of things to say, and be like, I want goldfish and mac and cheese and all those things. And so I in the same way that I've taught him many things, he has taught me so many. And one of those things is just all those things. And so I might say that several times, and it is just a funny thing that I keep catching myself doing. But anyway, for anybody listening and you're like, okay, so why would I listen to you? Who are you? Honestly, there's no expertise that I have to offer you. I am what I am. I'm not, not going to give you a ton of labels to work with here. But I'll give you a few labels that if I ever seem like I'm putting them on myself, that you can rest assured that they are not accurate, or I'm really trying not to put them on myself because they're just not me. But who I am not is I'm not a guru. I'm not a philosopher, a theologian. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a lot of things. And honestly, mostly what I can just come down to, what it boils down to in my mind, is I'm just a guy. I'm a person, and a lot of people who I want to have conversations with are just kind of like people who are doing this thing, whatever this thing is, when this thing is life, and just doing life. And yeah. But while I was working at a church, I had these seeds of questions had always been kind of in the background of my mind, but it was one of those things that became very clear early on that you just can't ask certain things. And I didn't until I had this huge moment happen, and was going to, it doesn't really matter about the moment, but we started like, okay, you know what? Honestly, people say, God is big enough to ask, for your questions. It never felt like God was, or never felt like the people or the church was. Um, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to start asking myself some questions. And so I started going on a journey, and then I got hired on at the church, and I was really trying to do what I could to improve what was, because I wasn't hired because of any talent or skill or um, intelligence. I was hired because I was the only one with a pulse who could remotely kind of ish do the thing that needed to be done. And so I did want to help, and I loved a lot of the people that I was, and I still love a lot of the people who I was interacting with. Um, but yeah, so I, went on this. So I started asking questions. Eventually, it led to me like leaving the church, trying to help another church, and maybe this other church. Because for a while I was like, okay, maybe my biggest issues are like with this specific church, and like it's a institutional religion thing, and maybe that's partially true. Maybe it's but in my mind I'm like, maybe it's like how they approach this thing, and then it started to become like, oh no, it's also like a lot of the theological ideas too, the views of God. And so I left that church, tried out another one, and tried to be a part of a few more. And I was like, okay, this isn't something is. I need to just stop. I need to stop trying to be a part of the church, and I need to just like be willing to go on a journey with myself and with God, whatever that even means. And so I spent a couple of years doing that, and I mean, luckily enough, I had some really incredible friends who also we just kind of went on this journey together of asking questions, reading books, sending each other things. And I lived with my best friend, and at the time we would just be sitting there and just starting up random, hugely in depth conversations for about 5 minutes, then moving on, then picking it up 2 days later or whatever. It was just very in flow like that. It was very nice. Um, but I realized that that's not something that everybody has, and even in having those incredible friends, it was still changing my beliefs and the things that were like the anchors to who I viewed myself as and my identity. It was incredibly isolating, and it was very lonely. And even with some of my best friends doing the same thing, it was still felt like, where do I go? What do I do? Yeah. Um, and so, that'll lead into what we're trying to do with the Sonder community. But before we get there, I want to kind of address some feedback I've received on the open letter to a dying church. Chapters 1 and 2 is what has been released at this point. Um, so, a lot of what I'm trying to do with this series is like gently hold up a mirror, because I'm really, really, really trying to approach this not hostile, and with I'm trying to approach this reasonably with empathy, and just to say, oh, church, I think in really broad brushstrokes, I think we're kind of missing it on some areas. You are. And the thing is too, I look at myself and know myself while I was working at the church, and I go, I know me. It was simply out of like not thinking about this, being so caught up with like doing church things that I forget and don't have the capacity or space to like think about these bigger issues. And so, if you're like, I was, I don't know, this could be me trying to intellectualize or have a certain level of arrogance in your eyes as you listen to this. I guess in your ears as you listen to this, but in your point of view is what I'm trying to say. I've never been accused of being intellectual. I will say that. Uh, I've that is not on the list of descriptors of me. But that's the opposite of what I'm really trying to convey. And so if you feel that way, that's fine. I'm really trying to approach this and you can never fully get rid of your bias, but put my bias as far back as possible and say, hey, here's the current state of things, just so we are aware, so this is kind of the view that a lot of people have. And yes, there is that, there are the outliers, right? There are there's the pastor who I kind of mentioned in the last, um, in chapter 2 that I don't say by name, and I won't right now, uh, that I've heard some feedback be like, well, a lot of us don't agree with him. It's like, well, a lot of people don't, but like this guy has a mega church. He has thousands of people every weekend and every day on Instagram hearing what he says. This person is also platformed by one of the largest churches in America a few times. And so it just is like, you may not feel that way, but this is a large amount of people who, see this person and agree with him. And there's obviously like people who's like, well, this group of people did this thing that was good. And it's like, yes. The point of this is not to say like that it is impossible for churches to be, it's just more of like broad brushstrokes. This is the general perspective. Take what is, really try to evaluate and say, this is about me. This is my issue. And that other thing, not so much, because that's not something I actually like do. But after you actually evaluate. So yeah, I think that this is something that is it's important for people to realize, because there's a narrative right now. Okay, this is where we'll go. There's a narrative from the mainstream pulpit that is like people who are asking questions and leaving the church and quote unquote deconstructing their faith. That's just the word that people like. And people that are church hurt. Well, you may have been. Church hurt people aren't actually church hurt. Church hurt people are people hurt. They're hurt by people. They're not hurt by the church. And you shouldn't let your hurtness from a person impact your relationship with church or with God. And we have like this Hillsong documentary that I think by the time this episode will go out, will have been released on Discovery Plus. And this is Hillsong, a documentary about the abuse that happens within Hillsong, the Australian church. Well, more than just Australian, but you know what I'm saying. If you're listening to this, it is very likely that you know who Hillsong is. And there will be many people who come to the defense of Hillsong without, from that perspective of like, it was just people who hurt, not church. And the many people who just come because like, well, why would you attack the church? And I think this is all confusing to me because in my mind, our job as humans, but like Christians especially, is to kind of see things of power and say, wait a second, let's take care of the victim and not the victimizer. And so if there's accusations of abuse from Hillsong or whatever church, is not just Hillsong, they should be investigated. We should passionately, desperately want justice. What happens in the dark should be brought to the light. I've heard that somewhere. Or it will be, I guess, is the more accurate statement. And to riff on this idea of church hurt, I think it is an especially just bad take on the whole thing. Because church hurt is a phrase. It's kind of like butt hurt. It takes the hurtness of the person and makes the hurt person at fault for being hurt. Like, oh, they're just butt hurt. They're just church hurt. I've been in so many conversations like that. And I think, oh my God, that is just such a bad take for so many reasons. I mean, think about it. Like if you're with a kid and the kid, like, let's talk about me and my 3-year-old. If my 3-year-old is hungry and he just is so angry and mad, it would be like, I could say, oh, buddy, you're just hungry. Get in your seat. Or I could say, you're really mad. I could tell that you're mad. Let's eat some food and then we'll talk about it. Because whenever you say, oh, you're just hungry, that delegitimizes the child's feelings. I mean, they are actively angry in that moment. And, part of that factor is the food. And it's not exact one-to-one relationship to the church, but you get what I'm saying. Um, but the saying of like church people aren't church hurt, they're hurt by people. I mean, it's not like some random, like the church is not like a bank. It's not like an organization that's like, oh, I expect you to kind of want to be screwing me over a little bit. Um, it's it's not that at all, and it's not like some random passerby is the person who causes the church hurt. I- you know what I'm saying? It's not like it's like, oh man, the barista at this church's coffee shop was at Sacred Grounds was just gave me a glare, so I'm out of here. No, it's usually from like people in positions of leadership and authority and pastors and all that stuff. All those things, as my son would say. Now, now this phrase, they're church hurt, or you're not church hurt, your people are. This phrase really shifts the blame from the pastors and staff who did the act of hurting to the hurt people and humans, and not the hurt people and humans' sin nature slash brokenness. It absolves any kind of like, well, it wasn't this organization or wasn't me. And that like doesn't do anything besides ostracize people that already feel on the outs. I mean, statements like that, I mean, they serve to be like an egotistical pat on the back for people who think this way already. I mean, but those are generally the people who don't truly want to see from the perspective of someone who has been hurt. It's the safe 99 congratulating themselves for not being the one. This makes bad pastors feel good because the hurt person should figure it out. I mean, they aren't at fault for someone else's hurtness. I mean, this is also the same for like the church is full of broken people. This feels good and sounds good as the sayer, but like it really does not land as the person who's actually been hurt. So then you may ask, what is the better approach? And now I don't know that I even want to say the approach I think would be better, because I don't want you to say these words and not like live the words. Well, I mean, even saying them is a step, I guess. What could make this whole presentation of the church hurt thing better is to say something along the lines of, you may have come to a church or a group. You may have come here seeking healing and hope and health and community and love and grace and acceptance. You may have come feeling and expecting all these things, but what you are walking away with is the feeling of pain and betrayal. You were abused and all those things. Now this may not have been me. This may have been me. And I apologize specifically for myself if that has been me. But this should have been a safe space for you. You were expecting safety and you are met with harm. And for that, I am deeply, truly sorry. And if it wasn't apparent to us before, with the amount of people and the frequency that this is happening, it is apparent to us now that something is amuck. Something is wrong, and we need to address it. And we're going to. We're working on addressing what is it about how we operate that allows the manipulation and abuse of people. That doesn't even just allow it, but apparently is the easiest place to do that. And so one, we understand I understand if you have been hurt by a church or abused by a church, if you never, ever, ever come here or come to and go to another church again, that makes so much sense because why would you? The trust that you put into God and to us, and we whoever we were, we may have broken that trust. And then you continue from there. The point being that you don't circle back and say, but you do have a splinter in your eye. You say, we have a plank in our eye and we need to address this plank. And, you know, you don't say this part because this is an apology. You don't take the point, the apology as an excuse to preach about why you were wronged. In this apology, you don't say this, but you hope, and if there is, some kind of part on their end that they need to reconcile within themselves, that they do it. But the point is, it's, if I'm in a fight with my wife, we don't fight, but if we were in some kind of debacle and I lashed out. I'm like, well, I lashed out because you did this. It just, where is that going to get us? It's not going to get us anywhere. But you, and like, sure, maybe there's a time and place for that. But considering that's the primary, like only thing I'm hearing from the mainstream pulpits, I think it's not time to talk about what the person with the splinter in their eye should do. It's time to say, I'm sorry that we have a plank in our eye and we've refused to address it. And you know what? We're going to do our best to address it. And if we've broken that trust for good from you, I hope that your journey of an intimacy with God can be restored. So that's my whole spiel on the church hurt idea, because that's something that I'm gotten feedback with this whole idea, and that I'm seeing quite a bit with in social media and on sermons. Because nobody expects people to be perfect. Nobody expects that. I mean, maybe somebody does, but for the most part, we expect people to be human and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I messed up." And so what I'm trying to do with the Sonder community is, so on a practical way here, let's just talk logistics, is on weekends do some longer form content, and then on Tuesdays and Thursdays doing some kind of midweek meditation. So something that's like a short thought to consider, or maybe it's an actual, like, take 5 minutes and just sit and breathe, we'll have conversations with people who have varying walks of life, maybe varying levels of expertise. But mostly I want to be more than a podcast, because what happened after in the middle of my going through these questions and changes of beliefs, like I said, it was very, very, very lonely and isolating, even with my best friends doing it with me. I didn't know where to go. And, the amount of books I've read, the context, podcasts I've listened to, all those things, all of that was very helpful for me. But there was something that about the communal aspect of my church experience that I just missed. It was very lonely and isolating, and I just didn't know where to turn. I didn't know where to go. And now I don't want to create a church. That's not what this is. But I would really like to have a safe space for the people who don't feel safe in a church, whether it's because of questions being asked or because of, LGBTQ plus inclusion, affirmation or allyship or identity, whatever, whatever the reasoning is. I want to create a space where we can just like come and have intellectually honest, good faith conversations where we wrestle with the things that are really important to us. Create a space where we can establish some kind of relationships that transcend our physical location across the country, across the world. I don't know who across the world will be involved, but hey, we don't know where we're going to go. to where, okay, so we see this thing in the Bible where Jesus says, "Leave behind your father and mother," and then we see all the people in the New Testament saying, "My dear brothers and sisters," and they say that over and over again. That's how they address each other. And we can get a sense that with this change from whatever they believed, whether it's Judaism or some other religion, that there was some shifting in their beliefs, and that this was at risk of, and maybe even cost, not just their like friends and community, but even their family. That this change in beliefs was so isolating from the people closest to them. And so I want to create a space, okay, let's say, delete that. People closest to them and pick up there. And so they greet each other as brother and sister. And now I'm not saying that that's how we have to greet each other here. More so to say, oh man, yes. If you are in a position where if you were to be honest, ask the questions you need to ask and go follow the path that you need to follow, it very likely could cost relationships, identity about yourself, and it may be difficult to know where to go and who to go with. And so I want to create a space that we can just say, oh, brothers and sisters, we're on this journey together. This is less about answers. It's more about relationships and just being in this wilderness together, trying to sort it out and just loving and being right where we are, even if these beliefs and these changes have cost us so much, and it's been met with very difficult conversations with people who you are very close to. But if you're to be honest, this is the way that you need to go. This is the way. So how we are going to, again, this is all an experiment. Everything we're trying to do is an experiment. How we're trying to do that is we're going to start an online community, and we'll meet on Discord, and you can jump on the sondercommunity.com and join the Discord from there. And there's the first group that we're going to start with is called Jesus versus Caesar. It's for people tired of serving the wrong God. It's a very large print, very short book. I'd love to have some conversation surrounding the idea, but it's we'll just meet once every 2 or 4 weeks, and I don't know how frequently. We'll just navigate it in the discussion group. In this book, along with a lot of other books, like I said, I'm not a guide. I'm not a guru or sensei or anything. I've not read this. It seemed interesting, and I'd like to, as we're going, evaluate and say, do we want to keep going with this? Because if this isn't doing it for me, that's fine. But this might just prompt some really good conversation. And honestly, maybe we'll get to a point where we have a group for, people who are needing a theological rationalization about certain ideas, and we have a group for that, or we have a group, whatever. Most of these groups, for the most part, pretty much all of them, I'd really like to have as just come as you are. Like literally, the phrase I've heard a lot in churches is "you belong before you believe," and I'm like, no, you just belong, and there's no amount of believing in anything that you need to have in order to be a part of whatever we're doing. So I hope that we can create a space where relationships happen and we can wrestle with big ideas and important things. And then a space where we can, if somebody has a baby, we can put together a food train, or, a surgery, we can send some kind of support, or, needs help moving across the country, we can help support them. The same way that I've experienced just incredible support from people I went to church with. I mean, I was given so much by the people who we loved and they loved us. But I'd like to create a space where we can do that. And this also, this is my advertisement right now. There's a lot I'm trying to navigate, and there's several people I'm having conversations with about this. When I say I mean myself, but also wrestling with this idea with other people. Right now, we have not had any advertisements on the episode because we're wanting to. It just feels like a little bit of a morally gray area. We're talking about church. We're talking about spirituality and life and faith, and it feels morally ambiguous to me. But this does cost something, and at a certain point, this needs to, if I'm able to keep doing this, it needs to kind of meet some of our real life needs. And so right now we're trying to avoid advertisements, and maybe we'll include the ones that we're like, well, we're really okay with this. Maybe we won't. I don't know. Again, we're wrestling with it, and I can't speak absolutely on the subject. But for right now, if you want to support this podcast, this idea, really, when you want to support financially, I will not fight you on that. You can do so by in paying for an invitation to the Discord. Basically, it's a pay what you think is fair model. So if you're like, this is worth $1 to me a month, then it's $1 to you a month. If you're like, this is worth $10,000 a month to you, I'd say it isn't. But I'm also not going to say it isn't. It might be worth $10,000 a month to you. So big question. But also, like, on a practical level, like even donation wise, I'm like, man, this is the idea of giving and idea of like church and all these different things. It gets complicated and gets hairy. So we're just trying to even sell items. So we have a few shirts and a journal, which we'll promote at some point, that you could buy, and just all the proceeds just help make the podcast happen. And hopefully one day we'll help us eat food. I mean, not that we're struggling to eat food. My wife works and is doing well, but you know what I'm saying. Supplies for some of our needs, and I would like to build a larger team and create a more vamped up network on our website. But all these things just cost money. So that's my pitch on that. I know it's a weird topic to discuss with in this world of ex-church people, but it's also on the website. We point to effective altruism. Whether or not you give us any money, you should look at effective altruism on our website, is on our support page. So please check that out. Thank you so much for the support of listening to the podcast. And for anybody who sends message us on the Instagram, or as we open the Discord, I want the feedback. We want the feedback. We want to wrestle with ideas. We aren't trying to sell a thing at this point. We're not trying to convince you of a right way of thinking. Often there's sometimes that may be the case, but for the most part, it's just, I want your feedback, and I want to be wrong for the shortest amount of time possible. And we may disagree, and that's totally fine. I just, I value your thoughts, and it gives me something more to address as time goes on. But I wish you love, peace, and happiness. Until next time. Thank you for listening. Feel free to continue to join us on the podcast. As always, all content is also written on our website. This content is only part of what we do. We want to know you. This is an experiment in creating a community that transcends our physical location. We have regular community pop-ups where we connect and have intellectually honest conversations. To sign up for information, stay up to date with our online pop-ups and events, to join our community on Discord and follow us on social media, check out our website at thesondercommunity.com.